What's going on, Bills Mafia? What a Wednesday morning. I think we can all agree that we just watched an absolute clown show from these two individuals, Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane. Following the firing of Sean McDermott as the Bills head coach, they took questions from the media, and it was an absolute disaster. We're going to break it all down on today's show. 5 takeaways from this Bills press conference that you guys got to hear. Before we do, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel because we're covering your Bills all offseason long here at the Bills Breakdown. Free Bills content all the time. Daily videos about the latest news and rumors surrounding your football team. We're almost at our next milestone as well of 13.5 thousand subscribers. Just need 369 more members of the Mafia to go down below and hit that subscribe button because when you do, you get free Bills content on YouTube. All right, so let's get into this, man. Bills press conference takeaways. First, we're going to kind of go in like a little bit of chronological order, at least at the start, because what they first explained here was that the firing of Sean McDermott was straight up due to the loss in Denver. And I think it's even funnier that Terry Pegula was asked late in the press conference as if the Bills had lost in the AFC title game, would McDermott have still been fired? And he really kind of dodged that question. Very, very interesting start here. But this is what Pegula said on the scenario. He said, "My decision to bring in a new coach was based on the results of our game in Denver." And then when you kind of heard him talk more about the game in Denver and what went wrong there and why the Bills haven't gotten over the hump, he really contradicted himself. And he talked about the bad officiating move with the Brandon Cooks, interception to Quan McMillan interception. We'll get to that in a moment, but I think it's important to note that before we get into this Terry Pegula more full quote about the firing of Sean McDermott and what the Denver game meant for it. He said that I did not fire a coach based off a bad officiating decision. If I could take you into that locker room, I felt like we had hit the proverbial playoff wall. 13 seconds, missed field goal, the catch, talking about Cooks and McMillan there. After the Denver playoff game, he said later on, in the locker room, I need to keep saying that. I'll keep saying it. It was feeling the moment, being there. So you blew up the franchise. You just decided to uproot everything you had going on because you felt it in the moment because the Bills were crying in the locker room, so you just decided to fire the coach? Is that really what you did, Terry Pegula? There's a first grader running this organization. As far as the meeting that was brought up earlier this week, we talked about in the video yesterday of Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, and Terry Pegula all in a meeting room. Pegula said that they meet very often throughout the season talking about the state of the team and where they're at. But he said, I didn't know where that information came from, where it came out that Sean McDermott was displeased with the roster and Brandon Beane and Terry Pegula did not like his sentiments whatsoever when he was talking to him there. Pegula said he had no idea where that came from. It absolutely happened. He totally dodged it. And there was just a lot of finger pointing and blame game being played by Terry Pegula for most of, if not every word that he said during this presser. When Brandon Beane was asked about the Denver loss and why the Bills haven't gotten over the hump, Pegula just totally contradicts what he just said and said a bad call was the reason they didn't win that game. So you fired the coach over a bad call, but then you said you didn't fire the coach over a bad call. What are we supposed to believe from this guy? How can we take him seriously at all in terms of what he has to say about this Bills organization? It's laughable. And this explanation for why you fired Sean McDermott when we've all come to believe that this has been in the works for weeks. He just completely says that it wasn't, and we're just supposed to take his word for it. It was a joke from the beginning. And then we got to what I'm sure everybody's watching this video for. Probably the biggest bomb drop in this entire press conference is that Keon Coleman was not only thrown under the bus by his own owner, but he was not Brandon Beane and the front office's first choice when they selected him in the 2024 NFL Draft. Yeah, this is when I knew. This is when I knew that this press conference was going off the rails, is when we just totally threw Keon Coleman and Sean McDermott completely under the bus. Keep in mind, Sean McDermott's a defensive head coach, and Keon Coleman is a wide receiver. So I can't sit here and say that Sean McDermott was pounding the table day in and day out for Keon Coleman, but apparently it's true. Here's what Pegula had to say on the situation. The coaching staff pushed to pick Keon. The coaching staff pushed to pick Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice from his coaching staff who felt strongly about the player. He's taken heat over it and not saying a word about it, but I'm here to tell you the true story. Well, there's literally a clip of Brandon Beane at the combine after Keon Coleman ran his 40-yard dash. It was a 4.56 and said, "Oh, hey, that'll make it easier for us to potentially pick him." So clearly he was on Beane's radar. It's not that this is a total off-the-board pick. And I don't think Pegula was necessarily noting that either. But it's just interesting to know that we have clear-cut evidence of Brandon Beane being interested in selecting Keon Coleman in the NFL draft. But I'll take their word for it. It was on the coaching staff. I still can't believe that something like this was made public by Terry Pegula here. The owner of your franchise openly admitting that they missed on a draft pick, openly admitting that a current player on the roster right now that just played in your playoff game last week, caught a touchdown against Denver, he's ass, and he wasn't our choice. How does that sit with Keon Coleman? How does Keon Coleman ever recover from that as a part of the Buffalo Bills? He doesn't. Keon Coleman's not a factor in the Buffalo Bills anymore. You can't come out and say those words and say, we didn't believe in that selection. That was the coaching staff. We catered to them. And then say we're going to continue developing Keon Coleman. That's what Brandon Beane said, by the way. He said that we're going to continue developing Keon Coleman. It's our job to make him a better football player. He also said that maturity has gotten in the way of Keon Coleman's development as a player and a wide receiver on this football team. This is genuinely, like, I didn't even know what to think when I'm hearing these words. They're throwing their current player, a guy who they pegged to be a starting wide receiver, a number one wide receiver for this team after losing Stephon Diggs. They threw him under the bus completely. They said he stinks, and they said that he's just got to continue getting better. We got to keep developing him. I would request a trade if I were Keon Coleman. There's no reason that he should want to be on the Buffalo Bills. There's never been an instance where a player as unproductive and not as really just not as good as Keon Coleman has had so much authority to go out there and say, I'm not playing for you guys anymore. You called me ass to the media in public. No, I wouldn't be doing that if I was Keon Coleman. That whole portion was really what's making all the social media rounds here, and rightfully so. It was embarrassing. Now let's get to the Josh Allen equation of everything. I thought this was really interesting too, man. Apparently, Josh Allen was not consulted at all about the firing. Pegula said Josh had, quote-unquote, no input. He didn't consult Josh Allen. He said he had no conversation with him before. He did say he talked to him after. And to be honest, before we get into that part, I don't even think Brandon Beane had much of a say in firing Sean McDermott. I think there's a chance that Beane would have been totally cool just running it back and bringing back the head coach. This decision came from the top. It came on a whim, apparently, according to him, came on a whim, just out of nowhere. The feeling in the locker room after the Denver loss said, how can we overcome this? Look, I get it. Firing Sean McDermott is fine. But the way that you've gone about it and the way that you're explaining yourself is some of the biggest examples of malpractice in an organization that I think I've ever seen. And I don't think Brandon Beane was too much consulted about the situation. But Pegula said this about Josh and the whole scenario. Josh sat there sobbing. He was listless. I saw the pain in Josh's face at his presser, and I felt his pain. I know we can do better. So you didn't even ask about the context of those tears. You didn't ask about the context of his emotions. You just said, okay, Josh is crying. I'm going to fire the head coach and see how that works out. And then he went on and said that Josh Allen, we're not going to talk about his reaction. We're going to keep that conversation private. We're going to keep those opinions private of what Allen thinks of the McDermott firing. You know what that tells us? He's not cool with it. You would have come out and said that Josh is cool and respects the decision if he did. But he doesn't. And now you're trying to save face by saying, yep, Josh will have a say in the head coaching search in Buffalo. Josh is absolutely going to have some bearing on who is brought in to lead the Buffalo Bills from here on out. Too late. Too late. This organization looks like a clown show again, and it's because of Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane. More so, Terry Pegula, the more we learn about this whole situation, though. Also, they just came out in the press conference. Josh may need offseason foot procedure. Awesome. Awesome. Beane did say that it's not going to affect any OTAs or offseason availability here for Josh, but this is just a cherry on top. Yeah, he may need a foot procedure done as well. He got really banged up during the postseason. This is one of the worst pressers of all time, and we're going to keep talking about it in just a moment. I got to tell you guys about this awesome deal, though. For some Bills polos, as the weather continues to get warmer. It's going to continue to get colder here for the next few months. But when it gets warm, you're going to want these Bills polos in your collection. You're going to be looking much better than the people up in the front office rocking these at chatsports.com/Bills polos. It's a 2-pack as well. You get the blue one, you get the white one for the price of one. Chatsports.com/Bills polos to get yours today. That link's in the comment section and description of today's video. All right. Got to talk about why Brandon Beane was promoted. What justification did Terry Pegula give to fire Sean McDermott and then keep the guy he's been building the roster with for the past 8 years? I'll tell you right now, what we're about to say, don't believe it. Don't believe them. Brandon Beane won a power struggle between himself and Sean McDermott. Both those guys reported to the owner individually, so clearly there just wasn't a clear line of command between the head coach and the general manager. So what we're about to read, because a reporter did put out a really good question. I'll give a lot of credit to the Bills beat here for really pressing the issue with both Beane and Pegula. They asked about it being a power play here for Brandon Beane, and he got real defensive about that. So that's why I'm saying not to believe any of this nonsense. He says on it being a power play potentially for him, jostling for power and keeping his job over McDermott. I've done nothing but have everyone's back, and for someone to question my character, my integrity, that's where I draw the line. He talked about how much he cares about this team, how much that this rides on him, and how much it has affected him and his life, the shortcomings of the Buffalo Bills. His wife's been in tears. How about we cut it out with the bullshit sob stories and go out there and win a Super Bowl, and go out there and put players out there that are competitive enough to do so. Clearly, I mean, that's not something that Pegula and Beane see as a deficiency of the Buffalo Bills. They believe the roster is good enough. In short, that's exactly what Pegula believes. He said over and over again and was conveying the message that the roster has been good enough to win the Super Bowl. And look, I agree in certain instances. After this season, though, and that's really what they've been hanging their hats on, it has not been good enough whatsoever. Now, on the specific justification and an example of why Brandon Beane is being kept and promoted to president of football operations, Terry Pegula said this: "That was my decision." And then he says, "I could be wrong." What? I don't know if anyone knows in this room, but Josh Allen wouldn't be here without this guy. And he was pointing to Brandon Beane. Okay, cool. So we can pick and choose what's what and what favors us when we're making these decisions. So Josh is due to Brandon Beane, which, by the way, true. Brandon Beane made the move to go out there and get Josh. But Keon Coleman's due to the coaches? So we're just, after a pick like that is made by Brandon Beane, we're just giving up power and control for first-round draft selections? There was just blatant lies going on during this press conference. I don't know how much of certain portions were lies, how much were truth, but, man, it is clear that they did not give us the real message of what was going on during this press conference. It was laughable, to be quite honest. And that's why we're going to conclude with this. Terry Pegula has no clue what he's doing. If you guys couldn't tell, it didn't really seem like Terry Pegula watches this team that much or digests what's going on with this football team that much. I don't think anybody can say, fans, media members, national media members, anybody, did anybody think that Terry Pegula did a good job during this press conference? Nobody thought that. And it's looking like more of an indictment on the franchise than a signal of good faith and a signal of we're trending in the right direction. We're making a move to get in the right direction. This press conference did way more harm than good for the Buffalo Bills and enlisting trust from the fan base. It's done none of that right here. Pegula saying the following. This is hilarious. I mean, look at the injuries that we had this year. Guys on the practice squad contributing in big games. You don't do that without talent in the front office. No. What? The coaching staff is the reason that players in the practice squad are performing in big games. How could you sit here and say that the Bills have overcome bad coaching because the front office has put good players in the practice squad? What? Some of the craziest hoop jumping through that I've ever seen in my life during this press conference. I don't know what else more to say. The front office has literally brought in those injury-prone guys. The front office has made bad decisions in the NFL draft. The front office has made bad decisions in free agency and given $12 million contracts out to Josh Palmer, who never plays football. That's what's happening here. And I think Terry Pegula is just blatantly neglecting all of that. I think he knows that Brandon Beane has brought dog shit onto this roster, and he doesn't care. It feels like the owner is truly disconnected from the fan base, from the interest of the team, and from the players as well, because they didn't even tell the players that Sean McDermott was being fired. They already left the building. There was no other way to communicate the biggest move in the franchise's last decade to the players. They had to find out from all the social media blasts. I'm embarrassed for these guys. They did themselves absolutely no favors in this press conference. What do you guys think? What's your biggest takeaway from this Bills press conference? Because there was still some stuff that we didn't even cover in today's show. I couldn't, condense everything that we heard into a 15-minute video. But let me know what your thoughts were on the presser. Your biggest takeaway. Comment down below. As that will do it for today's show. We'll talk more about this. We'll talk more about the Bills head coaching search. But I wanted to get this video out there first. It was an absolute clown show. And I think Buffalo's headed in the wrong direction. We're going to keep covering it for you, though. That's why you follow me on Twitter at Tyler J. Smith. And you give us a subscribe to the channel as well. YouTube.com/Bills News for the latest and greatest on your Buffalo Bills all offseason long as we're entering a train wreck. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, let's go, Buffalo.